Hello, and welcome to another season of the Storied Arcs podcast. I am your co-host, Mike.
And I'm your co-host, Alex.
And today we are diving deep into the world of die. And I mean that like the title means that, which is to say, in many, many, many ways.
All the meanings of that word.
Right. And they use it so cleverly. I think at the end of issue 2, or no, probably halfway through issue 2, they get thrown back into the world, which the world is called Die.
That's issue 1. It's halfway to issue 1.
Is it issue 1?
Yeah.
I got the trade open.
Yeah,
page 33. Yeah, I guess that's right. Okay.
It was an oversized first issue.
Yeah. So, but it shows them, being thrown into the 20-sided die Earth globe thing, and the caption box very simply says, "I don't want to die," and right there is, your first massive kind of double entendre. Like last time he went, his sister lost her arm. He doesn't want to die, and he does not want to play die. He doesn't want to be in die, and he doesn't want to die as in stop living. So I think what's interesting is all of this, by not calling this the Chronicles of Die as a book, which I think would have been a little clearer on a shelf, right? It would have said die as a place. Yeah. It's a noun. But he can use it now in any number of ways based on what he's doing in any particular page or panel. And once I started seeing that, I was like, oh, I really like this writing. This is clever.
Yeah. Because obviously the other way, because the setup is, as we talked about, it is a tabletop role-playing game that uses different sided dice, the play on words, the back and forth between the singular die and the plural dice. They do that a couple of times in the first issue, and that's how the first issue ends, I believe, is that play on, it's called a die. It is, they're getting all the possible uses out of it. It's the physical object, it's the world, the name of the game that they're in, all that comes into effect. They go back and forth with it, and it doesn't seem like they're cheesy puns, right?
No, which is funny because right before I hit record on the podcast, I said, let's roll. And then I chuckled to myself.
Yeah.
And somehow no, it's not funny at all.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things when the brain connects it.
Yeah.
Can't resist saying something about it. That. And my wife's definition of a pun, or no, it's my definition of a pun, is that it's not a pun unless someone hates it. So, if you say something and it makes everyone laugh, that wasn't a pun. That's just a joke. Someone has to roll their eyes by definition for it to be a pun.
Well, all right then. So, but yeah, they don't use that here. I think partly because there is a level of
sophistication.
I was going to say seriousness.
Yeah, that's true.
But you do have a character like Chuck, we'll talk about, who plays the quote unquote fool, who his whole ethos is not taking things seriously. But
that's true. And I think the maybe the big distinction early on here is that I get the impression that if this were an actual like D&D property, there would be some of the like Marvel-y style humor, some like lighthearted mirth, very much like the D&D movie.
Yeah.
Was exactly before I even saw a trailer. It's what I would have dreamt it would be and what I hoped it would be, which it had good emotional beats and it had good action, but it was also funny. And that's why this is not a D&D property. Die is quite different. D&D is just a way to explain a tabletop game. Role-playing game.
It's the analog, and they specifically talk about this is a new game. This is different. This is next level. This is beyond D&D. That's the whole point of what the setup is early on when we first start, when we join the story and they're kids in 1991 when they're starting to play the game. The whole pitch that Solomon gives is that this is better than that. All the stuff we had been doing, playing D&D and things like that, that was like junior level. This is the big time. And so it's meant to be a heightened version of the thing that people are familiar with. And said tabletop gaming, RPGs, D&D is the shorthand. So this is was supposed to be what's next. But but yeah, there is, though, I think, some of that, not humor, but I think as you go through and when we get down there, like jumping ahead a little bit, when they're in die and they go to the tavern, right? Because they've had a terrible day, that they just want to get drunk. The people they're interacting with, the various other patrons there, are the kind of things you would encounter in your story to then go on another quest or something like that. And there is that sense of, this is what the gameplay would be like. You go to this place, you meet these people, you go on a quest, you go on a journey, help with something or whatever it is. And so there are parts of that there. And you think that if this were an actual game, and I should say it has become an actual game, they did create an actual die RPG that does exist out in the world. But those would be the kind of parts of the game that I think bring some of those levity and humor, and that I think you would normally have, except our main characters are just like wildly traumatized because they had like the worst time in this game.
Super pissed to be there.
Yeah. Because
I mean, let's talk about that for a second.
Sure.
I just dove in immediately on this because we did so much on the zero, but so many, like, when the story started out on oh my gosh, this is not a great start. Dominic's 16th birthday party.
Yes.
I thought, okay, we're going from 16th birthday party into the game. We're going to follow these teenagers on their wild and crazy adventure.
Yeah.
And then there's this huge time jump. And now we're seeing, I think the whole thing is kind of like, okay, so this was 1991, right? His 16th birthday?
Yeah, they disappear in 91, and they
make
reappear.
Him a Gen Xer, right?
Yeah. 1691. Yeah.
And then
they come back
when they reappear as adults.
Well, they're
all very traumatized and broken, but not unlike most Gen Xers I know.
Well, they reappear 2 years later. So they reappear in 1993. So right. they're 18 at that point. Yeah. And then
they grow up from there with that trauma.
25 years in 2018 is when they go back. So now they are in their 40s in 2018 when this thing comes back to them and they're drawn back into this part of their life. Yeah, that was terrible specifically for them. But yeah, they're all just really broken people, And yeah, you're right. These are people that have extraordinary circumstances thrown upon them. But yeah, even those without it in their early 40s from this kind of generation, the generation that's, just above me, not doing so great. But when Dominic or Ash is recounting all the lives, like everyone's in a pretty bad spot, no one's doing all that great.
And a lot of them are like, divorced, can't hold a job.
Yeah.
That's normal life stuff.
In the process of being divorced, whatever it is.
Even if it's not the normal reasons for those problems.
Yeah.
So I think it was probably an intentional choice, just like I think Brian K. Vaughan was very intentional when Paper Girls choosing a Gen X. They're 13 in 1988, something like that.
Yeah.
And then when they come and comment on what's happening in 2016 or whatever, we have the Gen X perspective on a grown-up world for Gen Xers.
Yeah.
And but also, this is kind of serving up the same thing.
Yeah, it's also I think the age of the authors,
Right. Yeah, it's the age of the authors, which means we're getting, I think, a distinctly Gen X view of the world.
Yes, definitely.
In addition to everything else at play, I think that's just part of the backdrop and part of the texture is to say, like, yeah, that's like I forget, they're frequently referred to as like the forgotten generation, the ignored generation,
something like that. Yeah.
It's like the Friends generation. And I mean, there were like staggering statistics that came out on Gen X a few years ago that were all really bleak and depressing.
It's
stuff that's happened in their lifetimes. They're like 3 times more likely to be raised by divorced parents than any other generation. So just a lot of tough stuff that has created a lot of adult trauma.
Yeah,
but they're kind of the generation that's kind of just had to suck it up and deal with it too.
Indeed, and I think you're totally right to point that out. That informs the characters beyond, because we don't know what happened in those 2 years. But you have to imagine it's not very good. Again, 5 of them went in. Sorry, 6 of them went in. 5 of them came out, and 1 of them lost an arm. And they can't talk about what happened, which we come to learn was a very specific, intentional choice. But at the same time, it's the idea of like it represents repressed trauma.
Yes.
Not talking about it. And again, so we find out that they physically can't do it, but before we get to that, it does seem like, well, it's just these kids that went through a terrible thing and they refuse to talk about it. They keep it bottled in, try to deal with it, and look how it's just like ruined their lives as part of that. It does inform everything about it. The time frame, the specific time frame informs who these characters are. It's meant to tell us, the reader, something about them. Either that they're people that you identify with because you're of that generation, or you can at least recognize. Because I think these are, as broken as some of these people are, I think they're very recognizable. They're very real. All of them in their adult lives, when we meet them right before they go back into the game, people who are going through those things, who are dealing with the things that they're dealing with, who maybe didn't have the outlets because of the age they were growing up in to deal with the things when they were younger. So they are manifesting in ways now when they are older, that had they been born a few years later, the way society views and understands things specific with mental health and all that it would be, their lives maybe, I guess it would be easier because those facilities would have been, they would have access to them. But because they're in this very small, narrow window, that they kind of age past that to the point where, not that it's beyond help, but maybe in their mind it is, because you're right. They've gotten to the point now where they just got to suck up and deal with it because they feel that's what they have to do.
Well, but they're also like, they're the classic Oreo life stage where your parents and your kids are in diapers.
Yeah.
And you're caring for the generation above you, and you don't have the time for self-care.
Yeah.
And a lot of them feel like, what happened all the time before this? Like, I just fast forwarded into this.
Yeah.
Now I'm the caregiver for everybody above and below me.
And you add on top of that their actual level of fantastical trauma, like the fact that they just, so like there's that.
Yes.
There'd be issues and problems they'd be dealing with had they lived a normal life. But you add on this extra layer of, they disappeared into a hellscape fantasy world for 2 years and experienced like some of this worst trauma and have no way of dealing with it, processing it when they get back. And then they're thrown back into it,
Yes.
As adults, back into those bodies, those mindset, everything about them, that persona that they thought they left behind 25 years ago.
Yeah. So since we're talking about one of the characters, let's go ahead and just do the little rap sheet on all of them.
Sure.
And this is, we've talked about this mechanism before. I prefer meeting people in a organic way, as they show up to the party. Mm-hmm. Dominic thinks about the character and kind of you get the rap sheet on them.
Yeah.
That being said, I think since it's like an RPG style thing, I would not have minded the little wall of characters on the first inside flat page where it says, here's the character and all the essential stats.
That's right, because you're reading it in.
Oh, they have that in single issue.
Well, so I'll show up here. Starting in issue 2, in the inside cover, they have. Can you see that there?
I can. Yeah. Okay.
They have the players.
That was exactly my complaint.
They have each character. Which is funny
because issue 2 is called Players, and they don't have that in the trade.
Okay. So in the single issue, they have that where they say who the character name, what their role is, and which die they are assigned.
Like, come on. Maybe that's in the back of it's probably in the back of the trade.
Maybe it's in the back of the very end. Yeah, because it is the same. It is the same little blurb in each issue, but it's just it's a reminder every time out of just who everyone is, and in so much as that there's even a quick like 2-line synopsis in the beginning, and it's the same thing about disappearing in 1991. And in 2018, they go back. It's not even a recap page. It's just telling you who these characters are, and kind of what their what their ability is, I guess, based on what their character class is. So we can go into that. So I didn't realize that
it's
wasn't
not in the back of the trade.
okay.
But you know what it is? Like 10, 12 pages of essays.
There are
great. But
because there are essays. That's all the back material from the single issues, and there's a ton of stuff. Gillen and Hans wrote a ton of material. If you're into that sort of behind the scenes stuff, I'm glad that's included at the end. That's all at the end of the trade?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
And and it's a beautiful trade, nice thick paper. It feels really good, feels substantial, and they filled it out with nice stuff. Like normally they would call that a deluxe edition because they've got the cover variant gallery with David Mack's cover and all this other stuff. I was going to
ask that too.
Yeah, so they have the cover gallery. And they've got all the essays.
Variant covers. There's some great variant covers for this series. But that's too bad they don't have the recap page. Like I said, that goes through. Yeah,
I mean that should be the back cover. But
yeah.
Anyway, looking past that,
sure.
Inside cover.
Yeah, something like that
somewhere.
Yeah.
But maybe it's like the whole cryptography thing in Paper Girls, where it was like, people just Google it. Like we put it in the back of one of the issues, and once we did that, everybody decrypted all of the speech in the thing immediately.
But they put this opening page in every issue. It's the inside cover of every issue,
which I think is probably the convention of selling single issues.
That's
true. You need someone like I always forget.
It also gives us something to put in the inside cover too. It's not an ad. It's not credits.
That's true.
It's
but I always forget that there are like every once in a while I'll be at a comic shop and I'll watch a kid and his mom come in and he'll be like flipping through the bins and he'll just like pick out one because he likes the cover and it's just a random issue of something.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, this is the one I want. I'm like, first of all, what kind of world do we live in where a parent would limit a kid to one comic book per trip? But looking past that, I'm like, I guess I envy on some level that experience of just grabbing a random issue, sitting down and reading it and seeing what you can figure out.
That's what it was growing up though, man.
I know
what it was. I said my first issue, I don't remember what it was, but it was a random issue of G.I. Joe. That's all I know for certain. It was somewhere I knew the G.I. Joe characters. I'm going to start reading it and then got to find out where the rest goes, what came before, what comes afterwards. That's how it is, that every comic could be someone's first. So, but this is one of those
books. A great reason to do that. But in a trade, there would be no reason to stick out on the inside of every single chapter.
That is true. But also this is the kind of book too, that this is the kind of book here that, is it's a ongoing series, but it's 20 issues. So in the end, it's like a slightly bigger than a maxi series. But yeah, the fact that it's not anywhere in the trade is a little surprising, but regardless, we should go through and kind of familiarize
Dominic,
with everyone. Yeah. Dominic in the real world. And this is what it specifically says. I'll read this here. It says,
Dominic, what am I did so much work to make my list and just got it right there in front of you.
I'll read
single issues. People read the single issues.
Yeah.
Your shop probably still has them.
I'll go. Well, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe
not
some
number
versions
one,
of these.
but
maybe some version of these. How about I read through these here, and then you fill in with your research. How about that?
Okay.
All right. Starting with D4, the four-sided die. Ash is the Dictator. Dominic Ash in the real world. Ash in the world of Die. Married in marketing. Soul's best friend. So that's who Ash is. And obviously there are things going on with Ash that are unsaid at the time. And I think how we talk about her can be a little tricky in that he is Dominic in the real world, but she is Ash in Die. And which
is not uncommon in tabletop role-playing game. Yeah, you can
absolutely. Absolutely.
It's not uncommon. If you've ever played the game Munchkin,
I know, I've never played it.
Yeah, so it's like a shorthand version of D&D
that's
supposed to be fun. And like one of the curses you can get hit with or play on someone else is to swap their character's gender, which like sometimes they're wearing a piece of armor that can only be worn by a woman. And you change them to a man and now their armor's gone and they're going to die. Very common, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, but because they are now inhabiting the body now, and there are hints of it, and we'll see where we're going on. But you see hints of it, like the way he talks about his past, the way he talks about how he was teased and addressed, and there is that moment when they meet back as they're adults early on in that first issue when after after Dominic gets the box, the 20-sided die in it, and he gets everyone back together, and they're at Chuck's big house. And like the first thing Izzy says to him, she basically apologizes. And as she says, like, she apologized for not being sufficiently woke, implying that there was something going on, as we talked about, that there were things he was dealing with and maybe still dealing with, that because of the age in which he grew up in, he didn't have the facility or didn't have an avenue to properly do that, maybe comfortably, or he felt maybe safely. So it's clearly something he's dealing with. And we're talking about ideas of gender and sexuality. And is it body dysmorphia? Is he kind of is he a closeted, is it a trans issue? We don't really know. All we know is that there's clearly something he is dealing with, and being in Die, as we see throughout him, allowed Dominic in being Ash in Die, allowed him to be something he couldn't be anywhere else. And whether that's freeing for him, whether it's enlightening or illuminating for him, to look back on this time in this world, which is clearly connected with some really terrible stuff that happened, things that they did and did to each other and happened to them. But in the world of Die, he is Ash, and she is the dictator. Her ability, as we see, is I don't know, how would you describe it? It's just
I would describe so okay, I'm looking at my notes. 4-sided die.
Yeah.
Dictator, manipulate people's emotions, convince them to do her bidding with her words.
I was thinking like a Jedi mind trick kind of thing. Like she basically no. I'm sorry. I was thinking of also like the Bene Gesserit in Dune, when you use the voice, capital T, capital V.
Yeah.
You speak in a certain way, and the way that it's also, you see the way that it's lettered. It's a different lettering, it's a different font, different background. That's
right.
how she's using the capital
the
T,
ability,
capital V,
right.
the voice. And that means whoever's listening it does what she says. So she is the dictator at that point. And obviously, and Dominic is our narrator. Dominic / Ash, they
right.
are narrating the story throughout. This is their recollections, as it were. So
so then we stay in the family, move to Angela.
Oh, sure. Angela is D10. She's the Neo. As a child, just desperately wanted to be a cyberpunk. And we see her on the outside. She's Ash's sister. She's a coder, game designer, and a parent, going through a fairly ugly divorce and custody battle. Because again, all these people as adults just having a hard time. So she is, she is essentially the magician class. There's always going to be someone who's a mage of some sort, someone who can cast spells. The twist here is that it's technology based. It's a techno wizard, techno mage, I think is what it is.
Right. I want to talk about.
Cool. Yeah, but she needs to do her magic. She needs fair gold. She needs gold to do that. As in, that activates her magical abilities, but her abilities are all essentially technology based or computer based. Like the Fallen, we see she can control them. They talk and speak in binary. She has access to things through a fantasy element in this fair gold. So it's this mixture of science and magic, technology and magic, that I think is a kind of a cool twist.
Which is kind of a reverse alchemy. Instead of turning everything into gold, you can turn your gold into whatever your ability is.
Yeah. So,
which I think is a clever twist. And I also love. I mean, I like this character a lot.
Yeah.
But I love the techno wizardry because, one, I love steampunk concepts, and I've just never seen great steampunk execution anywhere.
Tough. Yeah.
But I'm so drawn in by the look and feel of it. I just wish there was a great steampunk video game or book or and I tried. I was lamenting that in April 2020 when I was desperately looking for things to binge read, and my father-in-law gave me one series called The Bone Shaker, which is it's a series of books, not comics. But yeah, I was it was from the early 2010s, and it was a steampunk future with blimps and everything, but also a zombie thing. And I was like, zombie stuff. I remember the zombie phase.
It can always be a little hokey when you try to combine those different parts of technology and things like that. Which
that's the thing is like, and I think the problem is with the way that our world works. If somebody tried to do a steampunk movie next year, they would try to make it super gritty, and it's like, this is absurd. Like it's an absurd premise. Please embrace it for what it is and make it super fun. And make it look awesome.
That's what it should be. Yeah.
So anyway, I'm excited by that, and I was also excited to see that. Like when I picture D&D, which again I know we're not in D&D, but when I picture these type of tabletop role playing games, perhaps it's my own ignorance, but I picture it to be limited to like medieval fantasy, like it's dragons and it's castles and dungeons and
exactly.
whatever.
And I think what they're showing with this is that,
and seeing a mech dragon is awesome.
But these are all stereotypical character classes that you would see in a D&D game, but there is that little twist. So like I said, Angela, basically she is the wizard. She's the mage. She can do magic. It's just that her magic is technology based. That's the twist for her. Which I think is, again, I think it's really, really cool. Angela's a great character. Probably notable that she is, in terms of being Ash's sister, she's Ash's younger sister. So, all the other characters, Ash, Chuck, Matt, Soul, Izzy, they're all the same year. They're all the same age. And then Angela was like the younger sibling who had to be tagged along and got brought into this. So that feeds into Ash's guilt that Angela was brought along into this game, even though she did want to play, she wanted to be there, but that's part of the residual thing that he feels of all the many things that he feels guilty for of this experience. One of those things specifically is towards Angela, and that she had to go through this and in the process like lost her arm,
Yes.
So there's that kind of extra level there, but yeah, she's a very cool character. And the thing the specific kind of quirk with her is that the fair gold that powers her magic, it runs out every day. So every day she's got to go out and find it, hunt it, and so she can use it and have access to her powers. So the way it's described is that they're addicts, got to get a hit every single day. Otherwise she can't use her powers. She can't use her abilities. Then what good is she to the party? If you can't access your abilities, you're just someone who's there. So she has to go out and find that hit every single day. Every
and her
morning
ability is to take control of machines.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's way cool. But yeah, she's incredibly powerful. She get into systems, get into machines, get into whatever. But if she doesn't have that gold every day, she can't do it, So she's the person kind of working behind the scenes for our other characters, to maybe be a little more attack based. So
Isabel, is the next one on my list.
Yep, Isabel is the D12. She is the Godbinder. They talk about her, a divorced school teacher with aggressively bilingual intelligence. They mentioned that she is aggressively bilingual. I believe she's French and English. Her power.
Vietnamese French adoption,
is that what it was?
Right? Yeah,
I think so. Yeah, but I think in terms of
language,
for the language, that's what I meant. The bilingual part there. The Godbinder character, she is she communicates and makes deals with the gods, various gods, and that the idea is that it's a transactional thing, that she can call upon them to do favors for them, for her, in which she would then owe something back, and vice versa. That if she does something for the gods, they would then owe her. So this transactional relationship with all these various gods to do various things, whether it's to heal somebody, to eliminate an enemy, or do whatever. She has access to them. She communicates with them. So incredibly powerful, but comes at a cost to her, a personal cost to her, because she could be forced into doing whatever the god's bidding is whenever they call that favor in for her calling a favor in onto them. And you see her deploy that throughout, just being like, at one point calling her down one and just being like, listen, whatever, I'll owe you, just do this right now. So kind of like accepting her fate if she knows what's going on, that this is going to come back and harm her in some way. But they need to get through this right now, and she has the ability to access and talk to these gods, so she goes and does it. So again, incredibly powerful character.
Yeah, and we'll get into this as the story goes on. I would say has the clearest moral compass.
Yes, definitely start out.
I mean, not a power. Well, I mean, it's probably the ultimate power, really, in terms of storytelling. But not on her character set sheet.
But it as Isabel, as a person, without question, when they are down, when they are down and die, without question, she is someone who has she's the one that's talking about having a code and doing this a certain way,
right?
And treating it a certain way and viewing it a certain way, and that obviously has consequences at the end of the arc, So, but that's a great point to put out. Who do you have next on your list?
Matt was next on my list.
Matt is the D8. Class is the Grief Knight. Parent and husband, statistics professor at a local university. He is probably on the outside world has the most normal life. In terms of he has the least amount of problems with his like family or whatnot, but he has a lot of tragedy in his life. That's the thing that's followed him around. His mother died when he was young. I think he had a sick child who's battled things. So while his personal life isn't falling apart, like it's not in shambles like his friends are, he's had experienced a lot of tragedy in his life, which kind of leads into what his power is as the Grief Knight, in that he has a sword and ability that's powered specifically by sadness and grief. So the sadder he is, the more depressed he is, the more powerful he is. And he has a sword that feeds into that. Basically, it's talking to him to bring his emotions down. And not only does he have the power to effectively be unstoppable, but again, the effect on him is that he feels all this emotion. He has to feel sad and feel all this grief, take it in, and that channels his energy, his ability to then effectively be unstoppable. He can go and kill a horde of enemy if he feels sad enough.
Right. He's like the Incredible Hulk, but sadness instead of anger.
Yeah. And he feels all that emotion. It sits with him that he has to deal with and have to then try to recover from. And
his sword makes him sad too, right?
Well, the sword eggs him on, but then as you see, like in issue 3, I guess when he gets down into the trench with Ash and they have to go save people, and he basically says, like, he talks to her, says, like, you got to make me sad, you got to, because she can do it with her voice, with the power, she can just do that to him. But also, just what she ends up doing is going around to the various stories of the people who are the soldiers who are dead, and channeling all that sadness, and him having to take all that in, and that he can then take that, and it materializes in him being an unstoppable killing force. That's a pretty screwed up power, but
it's true.
Yeah, but again, all these have some sort of cost to
them. So it's pretty obvious who I'm saving for last. So my next one is Chuck.
Yep, Chuck the Fool. He has the standard D6 6-sided die. It's a fantasy novelist with multiple ex-wives, no tact, and a film franchise. So he has the most successful career in that he managed to turn, even though they had the gesh on them, the magical binding, they couldn't talk about their experiences and die. He turned into a fantasy writer and sold millions of books and has a film franchise and all this stuff. And basically, I guess according to everybody, all of his friends, like, it's all a bunch of junk. Like it's like real B and C
pulpy,
grades.
Yeah,
it's real pulpy, but it's mass market, I guess. People buy it, they buy the movies. So he's like super rich or whatnot. But yeah, he's also just kind of a screw up and all that. And I guess he'd been a screw up in the past as well. He just kind of failed his way upwards, I guess. But he is the Fool. And
he's the only one who seems to have his power in the real world and in die. His power is luck. It's just like he just falls backwards into everything.
His power is, as long as he doesn't think about it, it's going to work out okay for him. He's kind of like
that's a real type of person. If we're being honest, it's like there's no magic.
Oh yeah,
and so many of the people that irritate me the most are the ones who are doing things I would love to be doing, because they didn't know and well enough not to bother trying.
Well, and it's almost
which you would think would be an indictment on me.
But
I've worked it out carefully, and I'm sure it isn't.
It's also a little worse than those who succeed that way by actively not doing those things. Chuck, this character specifically is set up as that he's not even thinking about it. He's not actively doing anything. He's not choosing to not do something. It's not that he's choosing not to think. He just doesn't think. And so they talk about when he goes into battle, like when the dragon attacks, it was like everyone, had a hard time except for Chuck. Because as long as he just goes and acts, he's like the personification of Leroy Jenkins. He just go, if you just go in, guns blazing, it's going to work out for him. Probably not anybody else. Probably going to get everybody else killed. They have to react to him. They have to be on their toes to react to him. But he's going to be all right as long as he just goes forward and doesn't put any thought into it and just reacts. He's first idea, best idea. That's it.
Right. And I feel like as long as you keep him drunk, he can probably stay relaxed. And it's probably not that hard to get him to drink.
Well, yeah. And there is.
But God, he's annoying on the surface level, and he's annoying in die.
Well, but also I think there is.
But that's a well-written character. When I'm like, God, I'm annoyed by it's 13 pages in, and I'm annoyed by this guy.
He has this, but he has enough understanding too. Like when they meet the elf princess, elf queen, they think it's the elf queen, and Chuck just goes right into it, tries to seduce her, and then immediately kills her because he senses she's a fallen, and turns out he's right, that he understands. He's the one that has full understanding and acceptance of his ability and power and die. There's a self-confidence to it. There's an assuredness that he has that I'm back here. This is what I have to do. I know he understands he's going to be kind of the annoying jerk because he has to be the impulsive one. He has to do the thing without asking, understanding that it may put his party in danger because they don't know what he's going to do. He's unpredictable, but he's accepted the fact that this is the only way I can operate, So, so this elven princess comes down, a character that they knew. They met her the first time they were down here. I guess she had been an ally or something at the time, but Chuck understands there's something different because he just senses there is. So boom, he reacts without thinking. And everyone else is like, what are you doing? This is crazy. Chuck, you stop and think about something, but he knows he can't do that. So there is this self-confidence, that smugness. There's a cockiness to him, which does make him unlikable, But again, I think he's a character that's accepted that because he understands this is the only way he can operate in this world. Only way his powers work. Only way the only way he has any use into the party in this world is effectively being a liability to everyone but himself.
And basically, like, if he didn't know that by now, he wouldn't be here.
Exactly. Yeah. So he has to have the self-awareness to be the jerk. Because if he didn't have the self-awareness, it wouldn't work. So yeah, he has to know he's doing it at the same time, not plan on doing anything. He just has to really fully lean into the fool character, which would make him totally annoying to be around because he could do literally anything at any time because that's the whole point of him. The whole point of his character is that he can do anything at any time. That's going to be fine for him, but may totally screw you over. So.
Right. Yeah.
Yep.
So finally we come to Solomon.
Yeah.
And now I've never had a friend named Solomon. I think I know like the famous Solomon of biblical times. I know Solomon Grundy. I don't know how people pronounce S-O-L as a nickname. Is it
if it's Saul or Soul, right?
Right. Saul or Soul. Yeah.
I don't know either. In this case, I went Saul.
Yeah. Tell me what was in your head.
I went Saul because it was short for Saul.
S-U-L. Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Or S-A-U-L, whatever, like Saul.
Oh yeah. Saul. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. But I could easily see it being Soul too. Like pronounce it as it is.
Saul better.
Yeah, because
Soul sounds like S-O-U-L.
Yeah.
And I think that word may come up in other contexts in this series. So let's go with
I went with not pronouncing the word, just shortening Solomon.
Yeah, I don't know why there's like a little thing in my head where I have to know how they're pronouncing it.
I'm with you too because soul is a thing. That's an actual word. But
Yes.
because it's a name, I'm going in my head. I always read it as Saul, as short for Solomon. So
Yeah.
But yeah, he is the game master in this. He is the grand master, I guess. He has the D20, and he's been trapped in the world of die for 25 years. And it is him who brought them back, because he tells them that they have to finish the game, which is, when they all get back there, they realize, oh, wait, like, we're adults now. We have responsibilities and things to do. And Angela's talking about missing like a custody hearing and things like that, which, like, yeah, you're going to miss that. And then her husband's going to get custody. Like, she's going to lose custody of her children because she got literally pulled back into a game again. If she doesn't get back there, because they know
real time.
Yeah, real time happens. And so there's this level of, on one hand, it's just like, oh my God, we're back in this place again. And on the other hand, there's just the inconvenience of not being at home. There's a specific inconvenience of the potential peril they're in, but the very just overall inconvenience of like, oh crap, I can't get home because I'm going to miss all these things I have to do because I'm an adult with responsibility and a life. So I like the two levels there when they're drawn back in, when Saul brings them back in and forces them to go out and play again.
Yeah, and what's interesting, and this is a great quote from the book, I think at the end of issue 2, most of them, she's interested in getting back up as quickly as possible to the real world.
Yeah.
They would all like to leave.
Yeah.
Although none of them are living great lives up there.
No.
But at the end of issue 2, when they choose their path, they choose to go through the front instead of where they had gone last time, because they can, and I quote, "We can survive anything but our past."
Yeah.
Oh, that's a great,
it's a really good line.
I mean, it's such a good line. Like, do you have that line and then write this whole series? Like, to me, it's that good of a line that just based on what I knew from the first 2 issues, I knew that was like the golden nugget in this trade.
Yeah.
And I suspect that will just keep getting more and more mileage as we go on.
Well, I absolutely, because especially at that point, we know effectively nothing about their past. We don't know we don't know all that happened in their first time they were here. But all that we know is that they're all traumatized by it. It screwed them up big time. Again, Angela lost her arm. Saul was left here. Now he's he was stuck here in this world for all this time. And yet they're all on the same page of like, we can't do that again, And so, yeah, it really primes you as the reader of like, oh, whatever it was bad. And I think there's an expectation that we're going to find out what that is. Right. Is that how you felt reading it? Yeah.
We're definitely going to find out.
Yeah. That it's a statement for the audience that, like, yes, all the stuff they went through was really bad, and we're going to show it to you. Like, you're going to get to see it. You're going to get to read it. You're going to understand where these characters are coming from. But yeah, that's a really, really, really great line. And yeah, that is kind of a thesis, because it's all about that. What this book really is about dealing with that past trauma. And maybe it's a metaphor for dealing with all past trauma. How do you move forward?
Very clearly. Yeah. I mean, if it's a book about anything, it has to be about that.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just fun. Otherwise it's just pulp. There's
otherwise,
nothing about this that says to me that it's just a fun adventure.
Yeah. It then just becomes, what it becomes is like the 1980s Dungeons and Dragons cartoon, which was basically this. It was kids playing D&D, and they get sucked into the game and they have adventures. Like, that's what the show was about. And it was ostensibly about, eventually they'll find their way home or whatnot. I think it ended for that actually happened, but that isn't what this is about, because we don't see we're not following that initial time through, like that's the Jumanji part of it, right? You fall into the game, and then you experience it. When you come back out, you're changed, but nothing around you has changed, right?
Right.
This here, I think that's where the goth Jumanji part is, because like a bunch of really bad stuff happens down there and it screws them up, and they come back and they've lost all that time. So it's all about what happened then, and we all that's going to be revealed to us as more and more of the character stuff's revealed about them. Like I said, we know at that point, issue 2, we still know very little about who these characters are. In that second issue, we saw a little bit of what everyone's power was. That was kind of the showcase. So issue 1 is really them set the world up, get them back into die. Holy crap, we're back in this fantasy world. Issue 2 was we saw everyone got to use their power a little bit, right? So everyone get to do what they do. And even I think Ash even talks about it, like when they're back there and once their mind wraps around their back and die, like everybody falls into place. Everyone goes back to doing what they did back then. I guess there was some sort of hierarchy of decision making and things like that. And when an attack came, who led it, who did what, everyone had a role to play, because that's what happens in a party like this, in a quest like this. And when they jump back in there, it's like no time has passed, you fall right back into place. And I think Ash has some trepidation about that. Like there's worry, like, oh no, here we go again. It's like, did we learn anything from our last time? She's afraid because you fall back into it 25 years later, and like so seamlessly when you're presented with these situations, these obstacles, you just go right back to doing what you did the first time. And clearly that didn't work out so well. But so now she's afraid they're going to do that again. And so again, it's all about informing that whatever they went through that first time was really, really bad. And she's afraid now that they're going to be, that they're caught in this loop, and that's what we get to when we get to the end of this arc here of they were expected to keep playing the game, right? They got to follow the quest that Soul laid out for them. But in an effort to not do that, they try to break the game. They try to break the game and bring Soul to them. And of course, that has consequences for them. But, here in this early part, we see that fear that they're so scared of what happened and what they did the first time that they will do anything to try and do it differently, because that past is so traumatic to them. They'll make it, they'll make potentially worse decisions, rash decisions, simply to not fall into the same trap they did the first time,
Right. Which is what trauma does. I mean, that's absolutely, that's PTSD textbook. And I think that is still some of the commentary on, I mean, I don't mean this as offensive, but when I was growing up, the guys who gathered, in someone's basement and played D&D were typically not seen as like healthy, well-adjusted people.
Yes.
But it was a form of escapism from life or trauma or bad family situation. Let me just say that's not true. I don't think it was true then exclusively.
No,
it certainly isn't true now. I know plenty of healthy, well-adjusted people that play, role-playing games. And it wasn't just role-playing games. I know people who would put a set of headphones on and play video games for 16 hours.
Like,
you can't hear your parents fighting if you're murdering people for 16 hours a day on Call of Duty.
Absolutely. And there's the aspect that is
the escapism just transitions from metaphorical to literal, and that's the premise of the series. That's
exactly what I was going to go with. The idea that it's not just playing a game; it's the type of game. It's role playing. Is that while you're doing this, you are not yourself. While you're doing this, you are your character. And I think that's what the idea is. But what we have here, and maybe that was the case when they started, when they were kids. They're in this fantasy world. They don't know what's going on. But there are these characters, they have these powers. It's probably pretty exciting at first, and then probably terrifying and also exciting again because you're still kids with these powers. But now they're back as adults. And now they are being forced to, again, assume these characters. But they're still people who have 40 some odd years of life experience now.
Right.
They're
people with 401ks.
Yeah. How can they contend with being these characters? And that's why we think about someone like Chuck. Chuck never really grew up, right? His whole life since then has been about dealing in these fantasy worlds and making a living off it. So he jumps right back into it. Then you have Matt, who has dealt with all this grief, but understands that, like, wait, I have to go through more of this grief and trauma. It affects me so much more now because I understand the cost, because I've lived through stuff now. Versus as a kid, maybe you feel invulnerable to that. But now as a 40 some odd year old parent and husband, that takes even a bigger weight on him, so
Right.
It's less about, now they can't hide behind their characters. They can't use that as a shield because it's all front facing now, which I guess makes what Dominic/Ash goes through that much harder, because
Right.
he actually is inhabiting a different body, one that maybe he feels, maybe this is his true self. Maybe this is who he wishes he could be, who he wanted to be at one time. Maybe he doesn't anymore. Again, it's all very confusing for him because, we as the reader don't know it yet. You can pick up on these things. They're very obvious.
Right.
There's a subtext going on that they haven't talked about yet, but there's a very obvious surface text just because, in this world, he's a woman.
Right. Well, it's
and
like, you're
him.
2 issues in,
Yeah.
all you know about him are these things. And so it's like, you have to reverse engineer.
Yeah.
What would, what leads a person to make those decisions. And there's a short list of answers.
Yeah. And then how, it's one thing to make the decision to play the character. How does it then affect you when you get pulled into the world and you become that character? It's one thing.
Or when you live 2 years as that character and then you're back.
Yeah, yes, and you're back. Yeah, and then you live 25 years with that experience, and now you jump back into that person you were when you were 16.
Yeah.
Or maybe who you thought you were, who you wanted to be, maybe who you still want to be. Again, it's all for
I suspect we'll get more light on that. I suspect the series will continue doing flashbacks. To be clear, Alex has read the entire series.
Yes.
As is almost custom now on the podcast, I have not read the entire series.
Yeah.
I kind of like the suspense of it, but I'm not pledging this time to stay on track with the recording.
I'm
going
to
rip it off.
Yeah.
At some point.
But I think again, when we talk about dealing with that sort of trauma and everything with it, it's clear it's more than just what they experienced. Because again, this is something that clearly is unresolved in Dominic's life as an adult, something that was clearly going on with him prior to this game. He talks about how some of these bullies,
some of it is what drew them to the game in the first place.
Exactly. It is. So these are things that these are issues and things they were dealing with prior to them even playing this game die. Probably when they're playing other role-playing games, maybe they were playing D&D at the time, like actual D&D at the time, doing other games, other things like that, other role-playing situations. Who knows what, Dominic even says too, in his narration, that even back then in school, everyone called him Ash. He still went by that name, which is his last name, which obviously can double as like
Ashley
a non-gender.
Ashley or Ashley,
but both ways, but specifically not Dominic. So even as a child, he's choosing a different name, choosing a different moniker, even though it is, I guess it's his last name, so it's a surname, but he's choosing to be called by something else. And then when he gets back out into the world, we see that when, as adults, when he gets to Chuck's house later and he's greeted as Ash again, he's like, well, it's Dominic now, because he's been living that way since he got back. So again, to be thrown back in this again, dealing with all those things again beyond just what they went through the first time here, that's what the story is all about. And to not have that cover anymore, I guess, because I guess these characters they're more them now, I guess, than they were as kids. As kids, because they don't know who they are as people yet. They are these characters. They have to live through that. Now they have these full lives they've lived back in these bodies, back in this world, right? There isn't a cover, right? There is no shield there. They're not role-playing anymore. They are themselves in this world. Even though they may look different, they look younger, they have these abilities, they are just themselves back in this world. Which I think is that's a twist then if we had watched, like I said, if we watched in real time the first time they got sucked in as kids, because then they would have been. Again,
I suspect we're going to see that at some point. Yeah. But the last thing I want to say about Solomon, which we probably want to cover something in the back half of the trade here at some point.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah,
but there's something interesting here to me that's both about tabletop games and about Solomon in general. And in game theory, Solomon is doing what he's playing what's called an infinite game theory. And an infinite game theory is where the rules are changeable. The objective is not to win. The objective is to keep playing. So every decision you make is to perpetuate the game, whereas a finite player wants a finite ending.
Sure.
And I think you have 5 finite players and 1 infinite player.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, the infinite player is the game master.
Yeah.
And so you're in a really unfortunate situation. And like D&D is a thing that doesn't really end. Like the goal is to keep it going.
Well,
like a campaign will end, but
that's to say it ends when you decide it ends. And I think that's the way that's portrayed here is that the only way for them to go home is like there's like an incantation they have to say, but everyone in the party has to agree. So like if 2 of them want to go home and the rest of them don't, it doesn't work.
Right.
That way.
Well, they're never going to agree.
Exactly. All 6 of them have to go home, have to choose to want to leave. And that's what happened the first time.
Which
and
then it obviously begs the question how they got home without one of them.
Well,
the first time, that's the reader.
Exactly,
as soon as you get the mechanics, you're like, hold on, I see a flaw.
Yeah. Well, hold on. I'm trying to see. Do we get that here?
You get that revelation, but not in issue 2.
No, isn't there somewhere in there where they flash back to that in this first arc where like what happened is that they won the game, quote unquote, the first time through. It took them 2 years, and as the 6 of them are together, I'm pretty sure it's here. If not, minor spoiler, but it's not important. The 6 of them are together, like they're like holding hands in a circle or whatever, and they're all choosing to go home. And right before it happens, Soul gets grabbed by the Grandmaster and taken out. So the incantation was complete, but so everyone wanted to go home. They were all on the same page there, but Saul got ripped away, and then they came back, and so there was no chance for anybody to stay, save him. They didn't know how to get back to die. That's where this regret comes in that they have about leaving him behind.
You're right. Yeah. This is an issue 2.
It's okay. Yeah. All right. Yeah. That's what I thought. So,
but again, now, I mean, look how long we just spent talking about the 6 characters without really talking about the plot, which just shows how much there is here. Yeah. And again, I think this was a fast read.
Yeah, I think
there's just a lot to chew on.
There definitely is because what you brought up about the game theory is that there is your setup right there. The 5 of them want to go home, but they need Soul as well. But Soul is now he's now the Grandmaster. He's now running the game. So why would he want to leave? So now they have to convince him to leave. And so there is your story mechanic. There's your setup right there. Everything flows from that.
Right.
And then what happens specifically, the kind of the specific plot points, I'm not saying they aren't necessary, but they are a little more incidental in terms of, as we start seeing in the, especially the other 3 issues in this arc, issues 3, 4, and 5, everywhere they go is a different world. It's a different side of the die. The world is a 20-sided die. Everywhere they go is a different realm that's kind of governed and dictated by kind of a different story they grew up with, a different story of fantasy, a different story of that the world has kind of brought in. Again, we talked about things that maybe a little more essential to like British culture and whatnot. So it's there are fun things to talk about. I think there's some cool stuff there. My favorite of the ones I think is the front. Is the Tolkien one,
which is I mean, it's not just Tolkien. I mean, Tolkien actually fought in trench warfare in World War I.
Well, and I think that's what's so great about it is that it is the mix of Tolkien's history of having actually fought, because you see the trench warfare. There's what you have to assume is like mustard gas, right? There's a gas that comes out there,
right?
They clearly standing for mustard gas, but then that is mixed with the specific plot points taken from Lord of the Rings. The one
eagle, flying away.
The one soldier they're talking about, how his ring was this symbol. This thing he carried. Obviously, it was his wedding ring. But
right
when you talk about rings and Tolkien, this only means one thing. The dragon being right there. what else do I have here? Oh yeah, you mentioned the Eagles, obviously.
Right.
In fact,
Of like and also the way the Eagles, the way that goes.
Yes.
Is perhaps his answer to everyone's question of like, why didn't they just fly the Eagles there with the
exactly?
ring?
Yeah. Well, of course,
they get shot down and then they're dead, and someone can just peacefully collect the ring.
That issue ends very wonderfully with like quoting the line from the Boromir line of, how do we get there? You just simply walk. How do you get the danger? You simply walk there. But what I love about that too is that Tolkien, or not Tolkien, he is like the master of this realm. He comes and he talks to Ash. And this version is very clearly abhorrent of the idea of like literal translation and metaphor and allegory, which Tolkien himself was very adamant against. The fact that he would claim that Lord of the Rings was absolutely in no way allegory to his experiences in World War I, even though you don't even have to know his history to read it and be like, this seems like it's clear 1-to-1 with these things here, but he was very adamant. He didn't like allegory. He didn't like that. And so to have this version of Tolkien, this version in this game, have that same resentment, at the same time be patrolling this realm in which his work and his life are now both mixed together in allegory for this game, is like a third level of meta there. I thought was really interesting, and
so let me ask
you, a fun way to approach it.
This is actually my last note. I'm sure you have plenty more, but my last note is to ask you this discussion question, and I'll throw this out there on Twitter or wherever.
Sure.
Are there other real people in Die, and if so, how many? And so when I saw the Tolkien there, I thought, okay, well, that's like whoever the game master is, that's their version of Tolkien. Like they wrote that into the game. However, when Solomon dies and becomes like fallen Solomon, you learn that all of the fallen are people who are real people, and in Die who died. And so it's like, okay, so there's more than our 6 paragons.
Yes.
But not every, like some of these are NPCs basically.
Yes, they are.
And others are real people. And I don't know if there's a way to tell a difference, but that makes Isabel's whole thing about, she wants to take responsibility for their actions. She doesn't want to kill people in Die. And her sense of morality, I think, could come around and play a very interesting role in the future.
Oh, definitely. Well, it's what ends the arc in terms of it splitting the party up there. Because, when they first got back there, you mentioned her kind of moral compass was like, hey, if we're back here and doing this, we need to treat this, because now that we know better, I guess, like we have experience, we treat this as real. Anything that we do down here, it was like, don't do anything down here you wouldn't do in the real world. So we're not killing people at random. We're not doing this stuff. Yeah.
Because even if the person you killed down there isn't real, the experience of you killing someone, you have to take with you.
Yes. However,
how she's the only one who gets that is beyond me.
But
she's not the only one, but the only one to bring it up.
Because what they talk about, the first time they encounter the Fallen back there, if you read Dominic's his narration, he's basically like, oh, the Fallen, basically the orcs, they're mindless. We can kill them. They're zombies.
Right.
Because that's what they think they are. So in that case, what Izzy, I think, is talking about is their interactions with the other characters or whatnot, other people in the world. She's not thinking about the Fallen at that point. It's only when at the end of the arc, when Saul mentions that to him, that's when Izzy has the realization, like, oh, wait a minute, the thing I said before, that now applies to the Fallen as well. It's not just the people here in Glasstown that we met, the people, the people that worship them as the paragons or whatnot, and specifically see Izzy as like a goddess. It's not just them, that we have to deal with. We have to treat everyone, including the Fallen, because those are real people now. And that's the split in the party when she's like, I can't do this with you guys if you're going to go out and treat this like a quote unquote like a game, because that's where Ash and Matt and Angela are. that the idea that it's just a game now, that we have to do whatever the game requires of us to get home. That the whole point is to get back. And Izzy is like, well, no, we can't do that. It's going to cost us. Like, what are we going back to? Who are we going back to if we do that? You know? And the only reason that Chuck goes with her, because Chuck is like, listen, my life sucks up there. I'm pretty cool down here. Why don't I just stay some more? Maybe I don't want to go home now. So that's where the split comes. It's, Chuck isn't going with Izzy out of some like real moral obligation. It's more just like, listen, I got better things going on down here. Like, why would I want to go back to my terrible life, even though he is the rich one and the famous one, the successful one? Clearly, it's not a good and fulfilling life, But that's where the line break is, and so you're right to identify that in Izzy early on, in terms of that's the reason they split up. And it comes to what Ash saying, like, well, listen, the only way that we can go back then is we have to kill them. If they're not gonna play ball with us, if they're never gonna want to go back.
That is the only. That's a logical conclusion. So my thing is either Izzy has to abandon that principle, or everyone else has to come around, and that's actually the same on both sides now, right? So you've got this parallel structure of they are both absolutely dug in on their positions. Yeah. And you have to come aboard, or you have to get out of the way.
Yeah, or you'll be taken out of the way.
Right.
Yeah. No, and I think you're absolutely right there. That is the setup going forward, and the idea that, slight spoiler, the next arc is called Split the Party. That's what Volume 2 is called, because you're following two different tracks. Because the whole idea is we got to get out of here together, but by splitting up instantly makes it harder.
Right.
So having both sides be entrenched in that way of both wanting to go, because Izzy does want to go back. Chuck is on the fence; he will stay, but Izzy has the same end goal as Ash and Angela.
I have a feeling, though, if there was a consensus, including Solomon, all five of them want to go back, Chuck would be on board. But I think Chuck, he's in the moment, he's impulsive, he's mischievous.
Again, first idea, best idea. That's where he's at, and right now he likes being. Again, when they get to Glasstown, we mentioned the Brontes before. Glasstown is a thing of the Bronte children's imagination. That's their world that they built out. But when they get there, our characters, again, that's where the Paragon title comes from. They're hailed as heroes, and so Chuck walks in there and is like, "This is great," living life up there where everyone is they're getting food and drink and palatial rooms and all the services. So Chuck's like, yeah, why not live this up here? Why not stay for a while in a place that we're loved and revered? But I think you're right. If they got everyone on board, Chuck would not be the person to hold them back. But right now, since there is division, he's going to go with that first impulse.
He can live like a king down there, but he's also the ready, fire, aim.
Yes, 100%. And his gut was telling him, listen, I'm gonna go with Izzy here, because it seemed like
I already decided.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
It seemed like the right move.
There's no cuz.
It's just
this is what I'm doing.
Mind made up. So you have, and again, it's we see that, in the end, Ash has the most power. She can use the voice to get anything from anybody. And we see her manipulate, and I think what's interesting with her is that we see her reluctance when she first shows up there, doesn't want to do it. Again, the idea of revisiting the past and knowing what she had done before. There's that one night that she kind of idly cursed, I guess, that he would never rest. He would never die until he looked upon her again, And of course, you find out that he died 3 years after that. And then his eyes rotted out, but he can't actually die because he can't look upon her again. But then he has no eyes to see her. So he's lived this cursed life for 20 some odd years. So she sees the effects of what her powers are that she tossed off so glibly and so lightly when they were children. And so there's a reluctance to use it. But as they get further in the game, push comes to shove. When they're in Glasstown, the city comptroller, whatever, like the person that runs the council or whatever, she very quickly and very easily puts him under his spell, that he's going to do whatever she wants and be quiet about it. And she falls back into this habit that she clearly doesn't want to do, but yet it's very comfortable for her, but she knows where that road leads to. And I think in her mind, maybe she feels that she's going to be forced to do these things, and especially now that Izzy and Chuck have left. She's going to feel in her mind that she is forced to do some things she doesn't want to do. Maybe as a way to deflect blame of seeing it as a choice,
right.
She has to do these terrible things because we have to get home. That's the number one thing. We have to get out of here. We have to get home. So that to her justifies anything that she does. And given that her power is so strong and so overwhelming, it's easy for her to justify using it in any way possible, any way she sees fit. And that's potentially very dangerous.
Yeah. Well, that's all I have before we get ready for splitting the party, which we kind of landed on there.
We did. Yeah. I don't have much else. I mean, other than, I guess, some of the references we talked about the front,
Well, yeah, I was like, there's the references, and there's quotes at the beginning of it. Yeah. Now, I'm wondering, since I got those in the trade, are those also in the single issues?
Yes, they are. Yes.
Yeah, I figured. So single issues give you more. That drives me crazy.
Wait, hold on a second. Are they? Hold on. Actually, let me double check here.
So yeah, I just think the one.
Yes, thing... I'm sorry. Yes, they're on the back cover.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
and
that's what it is.
Like.
Yeah.
I want these in single issue really, really badly.
Yeah, they're really great, and they're beautiful covers by Stephanie Hans, and they're amazing variant covers. I have a number of variant covers. I have my issue 1 signed by Stephanie Hans. Never seen Kieran Gillen at a show yet. Hopefully one day. Actually, I think he was at New York Comic Con when I was there, but I missed him. I didn't get a chance to do that. But a lot of variant covers from a lot of artists that I love did work on Die, and I have a lot of those signed as well. So it's a beautiful, beautiful book to look at. But the one thing I'll say about some of these references is that we mentioned that in issue 4 they go to Glasstown. The place is called Glasstown, and that is a reference to the Bronte siblings, the world that they created.
I did look that up, but I did not. I've never read it.
Neither have I. But it is a thing that exists and is pulled from the mind of the Brontes. So the idea that this is another story that exists in our world, like our characters know the Brontes and probably have read their stuff and read it, and they are probably more aware of Glasstown and Angria and things like that. The world and the works that the Brontes created, but that's brought into this world here. And then in issue 5, they mention Eternal Prussia, which is these like robotic warriors. And that's in reference to what's called the Kriegspiel, which is like a war game, like actual war game, war simulation. And I guess at this time, there's kind of one of the very first where they would simulate battle to understand how to better plan actual wartime strategy.
Yeah, which I think I've heard of apart from this.
I have as well, and
vaguely familiar.
And there obviously are things that have evolved to this day where where war games and simulations are how you prepare armies and whatnot. It's how you run through scenarios and try to get as much experience in war without actually having to go through it all. So you're ready and prepared for things. But this Kriegspiel out of the Kingdom of Prussia, I believe when I looked it up, it is one of the first and became one of the more popular in terms of that setup of and kind of understanding and simulation of war is what propagated through other armies throughout the world. So these are ideas that they're going to come back to. The Brontes, this war game simulation, the idea of, again, ways of telling stories in our world and how they have bled down into the world of Die. And not always exactly as they appear in our world. Like, again, the front is not exactly, it's the that we associate with Tolkien, the war experience, the elements from Lord of the Rings,
right,
kind of mismatched together. So they're parts of those things.
That's the interesting distinction, though, yes, between this and, say, the Unwritten.
Yes,
where
you are falling into the book.
You're right. You fall into the book, and you don't control the book. You only control yourself in that setting.
Yes.
Whereas here,
It is a version
It's
of
your understanding of the book is what manifests into reality.
Well, not your, but it's the creators of the game.
Right.
Whoever created Die.
Right.
Our characters, Ash and Chuck and Matt and all them, they don't control what's happening in the game, the realms that they're in, but the creator of the game took versions of things from our world, stories from our world, and that's what they're interacting with. That's what they're seeing. And the things that are introduced here in this first arc are the ones that are gonna play through. Glass Town, Eternal Prussia. These are I can tell you in a non-spoiler way, these are important ideas that they'll continue to reference, because that idea is going to stick forward. Yeah. So they are just places now, but they will become bigger. So there's something to keep an eye on.
I need to interrogate my wife on Glass Town.
Yeah. I don't think you have to know all the stuff with the Brontes. I think you simply have to know who they are and that they wrote, and that all of them contributed to the idea of Glass Town. This is something they did as children, that it was a shared world that they built out together. And I think that's what you need to know. I don't think the specifics are super important. I think the book tells you what you need to know about those things.
Yeah. Well, I need to read the Brontes at some point anyway, because one of the Bronte sisters has penned my wife's favorite book that she reads at least once.
Oh yeah. Then that's probably something that probably you already should have checked off a list. Yeah.
It's like we've been married 7 years.
Yeah.
Nearly 8. You think I would have gotten around to reading Jane Eyre by now. But I did read a comic adaptation of Jane Eyre. The recent one from a few years ago. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I liked it. They made some weird changes.
That was just called Jane, right?
It was just called Jane.
Yeah, it was updated modern time, or mostly modern time.
And now I have one that's a manga of Jane Eyre. Yeah. And I think at some point she's going to be like, why don't you just read Jane Eyre? I'm like, I've seen the movie. I read a comic adaptation. I'm reading a manga adaptation. Anything but interacting with like this dense, dry book. But like,
also you mentioned the author Jasper Fforde.
Yeah. Oh yeah. She's big into Jasper Fforde.
The first book is the Eyre Affair, where the character of Thursday Next, in that world, Jane Eyre and the story of Jane Eyre is prominent in that. So yeah.
Yeah. So to my shame, so I know I should read Jane Austen. Well, actually, I have read Jane Austen, but I've not read any of the Brontes.
Yeah. But, like I said, I don't think it's critical to
only so many hours a day.
Not critical to reading this story, but it's those ideas, the things that are introduced in. There's a lot of setup here in terms of what's going to happen. Obviously, there isn't a whole. The action is there's the dragon fight that we kind of drop in the middle of. There's the destruction of Glass Town and what happens there. Like those big action beats, not super important in terms of what's happening, because that's just them. Like that's them playing the game, right? Having to do things as if they were in the campaign. That's them rolling their dice to figure out what the outcome's in, what kind of damage you do, what kind of damage you sustain, things like that. That would be the actual mechanics of the game that they're just living, that we're not actually seeing. The important things going forward they set up are these ideas of the different realms, what constitutes the different realms, which are the different sides of the die. So those are the things you should really kind of focus in on as you're going forward, moving into the next arc.
Yeah. And with that, pick up issues 6 through 10, volume 2. Again, however you're reading, no wrong way to read it. Although I think after this one, we learned the best way to read it, single issues.
If you can get your hands on it, yes. Which they should be available.
6 through 10, come on. Yeah, I'm like,
well, but also
speculator pieces.
Also single issue through your library as well. Sometimes library single issue. You can get the collection, the individual trades, or the full collection. You should be able to go out there. So while it's always easier to read in the trade, I think you may get some a little extra stuff from the single issues if possible. So, but anyway you can get it, anyway you can find it, go out and read it. I think you'll find it worthwhile.
Absolutely. And with that, we will see you next Thursday for Volume 2.
Peace.